Got it. Hi, friends. I'm an alcoholic, and my name is Cindy. And it's strange being back on Zoom, I have to tell you. I'll get a little housekeeping out of the way first of all. My sobriety date is July 17th, 1996. And every time I say that, I just want to cry because I didn't think I was ever going to be able to stay here. I was one of those girls that just could not string together 24 hours. And here I am 27 years later, and who knew that that was going to happen. I have a home group, which is the Friday Night by the Book meeting here in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. And I have the honor and privilege of being on both sides of sponsorship. You know, I'm actually sponsorable today, and I get the honor and privilege of walking shoulder to shoulder with a bunch of other women. And it's funny, I got to spend some time with one of them today, and we were walking some alpacas. It was the funnest thing ever. And so that's how I got to spend my day, talking AA and being with another sober member of AA. I also want to thank Kevin. Thank you for asking me. It's always an honor and a privilege to get to do anything in Alcoholics Anonymous. And, like Dr. Bob said, he said, we do it for 4 reasons, right? It's a pleasure, a sense of duty. I take out a little bit of insurance in my own life, and I try and repay the debt that was so freely given to me. And I don't think I'm ever going to be able to repay that debt, but I'm sure going to try the best that I can. I don't take my sobriety lightly. And it is a gift to me. And so whenever I get asked to do anything in AA, I've been taught to say yes, because the truth is, when I say yes, I'm saying to what God has in store for me. I don't know who I'm going to meet. I don't know what message you're going to hear. I don't know what seed is going to be planted, but my job is just to suit up and show up. And so I'm going to try and do my best. So it's strange. It's like I'm talking to myself, which is what I do all day long anyway. So, it's interesting being back on Zoom. So my job is to tell you in a general way what it was like, what happened, and what I'm like today. And I don't always like to spend a lot of time on what it was like. I mean, we're sitting in a Zoom meeting on a Saturday night. Hello. I think we know how to get here. But I will qualify, as a young kid, I came from a good family, raised with good moral and philosophical convictions. My parents were not alcoholics, but we did have alcohol around us. And, whenever I think about my drinking days and before I got sober and in those early days, there's a passage in the Big Book. I'm a big book girl. You're going to figure that out really quickly. But it's a passage in the Big Book. It's the first paragraph in A Vision for You. And it says, for most normal folks, drinking means conviviality, companionship, and colorful imagination. It means release from care, boredom, and worry. It is joyous intimacy with friends and a feeling that life is good, but not so with us in those last days of heavy drinking. The old pleasures were gone. They were but memories. Never could we recapture the great moments of the past. There was an insistent yearning to enjoy life as we once did, and a heartbreaking obsession to enjoy life as we once did, and an obsession that some new miracle of control would enable us to do it. There was always one more attempt and one more failure. And then it talks about, not being able to picture my life with or without alcohol, and those 4 horsemen. And so when drinking first came into my life, my parents had parties. We had people around. They drank on a Friday night, a Saturday night. We had Christmas parties, New Year's parties, all of that stuff. And so I got to be that kid that sat on their lap, and I got to take drinks out of their glasses. And it was conviviality. I never saw really bad things around alcohol. It was always a really good time. But as time went on, like Bill talks about in his story, alcohol became my master. It became a necessity for me, right? What once started as really fun, being in the bars at a young age, having a really good time, eventually came into my whole life, began to surround around drinking or finding a way to drink. And it was lonely, and it was despair. And it was no fun in the end. And so, at a young age, having that alcohol around me, it wasn't a big deal, Now, by the time I was 14 years old, that was the first time I ever stepped into a bar. Now, the legal drinking age in Ontario is 19, and on the Quebec side, which isn't too far from here, is 18. And so because I had an older sister, I was able to get in the bars. And what I loved about it is, what alcohol did for me. Not what it did to me, but what it did for me. And every time I had that drink, I could literally be somebody else. I would at times too. I would totally give a different name when I was in a bar. I'd give a totally different phone number. And, when people start yelling your name in a bar and they're expecting you to answer, but hey, I don't know that's my name. So, it was interesting times out there. So what I would do is when I would try and go into these bars, I would get there early. I would befriend the bartenders because, you got to have friends that are bartenders, but also the bouncers so that they would let me in. And so I would go in and out of the bars for a long time. And by the time I was 17 years old, alcohol, it really did cease to be a luxury for me. And I was able to find alcohol as little helpers. Now, I have an extreme respect for Alcoholics Anonymous and I understand our primary purpose. And so I'm not going to talk about those outside issues. I'm just going to bucket them all in as though it's drinking. But alcohol did not bring me to you. It was other things that brought me to you. But what I know about my own experience is anytime I didn't have anything else, I always went back to the drink. It was always my friend. It was always that person, that thing that I could lean on to get me out of right here, right now. So by the time I was 17 years old, I had been going to the bars for a really long time. I had been asked to leave high school for the second time because they expect you to attend classes. Now, I was in the building. I don't know what the problem was. I was under the roof of the school, but they don't want you, drinking and playing cards in the cafeteria. They actually want you to attend classes. And so just before my 18th birthday, they kicked me out. That was one of the biggest guilt and shames that I had in my entire life, is that I didn't graduate high school. And that would carry me for a long time, whether it was through my drinking or my sobriety. Now I'm going to give you a little spoiler alert. As I got sober, I got to go to university. And I ended up getting a BA in criminology and criminal justice with a concentration in law. Don't use it. It's just a nice piece of paper that hangs on my wall. I got 2 teaching certificates as a Montessori teacher. I was a teacher for 10 years. I have business certificates. I have a lot of education. But that one thing that always sat in the back of my mind is I wanted that high school piece. And so my goal was to graduate before one of my children. And I did. I graduated before the first one. And so, don't ever think being in Alcoholics Anonymous and not having that education, if that sits at the back of your mind, then do it. Do it for you, right? Do it for that sense of accomplishment. And that's my biggest thing is I got to do that. So that was a gift of sobriety. So I got kicked out of high school. I now have to work in a job, and I'm working in a job that I have no business being in. I'm this almost 18-year-old girl, and I'm delivering car parts for a company, and I was harassed a lot and catcalled and all of that kind of stuff. And I just shouldn't have been in a place like that. But because alcohol had been such a big part of my life, I had to have a job to support that habit. And I would do that job for a really long time. And so by the time I was 20 years old, I had a moment of clarity that we talk about. And I had a moment where I was desperate enough to tell the truth. And what I have learned is that desperation is going to only get me so far. I need to get to a place where I become utterly hopeless, because when I am hopeless and I understand the true nature and fatal nature of my alcoholism, I will then do whatever it is that you tell me to do. Right. But if I have one more good idea and one more backup plan, there is no way that I'm going to do what you're going to ask me to do. And so at 20, I told my doctor that I was struggling with some addiction, and she sent me to a psychiatrist, and he just tried to help me the best that he could. And what he did is he introduced me to an addictions counselor, and we started to make arrangements for me to get sober. So I was going to go into a 28-day program, and I was going to get my life together. And I got all my affairs in order. I ended up in detox, and somewhere in the back of my mind, I wasn't ready. And what I did is I looked around that room, and you didn't look like me. You were older than me. You had lost things. See, I still had the things. I had a job. I had a family. I had a car. I had all of those things. And you were much older than me. So I convinced myself I didn't belong there. And so I ended up leaving that detox. I did the next best thing to get sober. I moved. I did a geographical cure. I went to the west coast of Canada. So I went to BC. Now, if you're going to go to the 2025 international convention that's coming up, it's going to be in Vancouver, BC. And so when you go there, you can think about me and my great escape out that way. So I decided to go there. I was in a new relationship. We get in the car, we travel, we go. And along the way, we stopped in Vegas because we were traveling through the States, and I ended up drinking again. And see, alcohol, I thought wasn't my problem. If I just stay away from its little helpers, then everything is going to be just fine. And what it ended up happening is I started to drink a lot. I was lonely, although I was in a relationship. I was taking a lot of medication, and things were not going well. And we ended up moving back, and my life spiraled down. And it took about another year before I became willing again. But of course, like any good alcoholic, I had a plan. I was going to get sober. I was going to go into detox, get sober for a couple of weeks, pull my life together. And then I was going to find a job and relationship and all of that good stuff, right? A good alcoholic plan. See, I didn't understand what it meant to be an alcoholic. See, I thought if I just fix my circumstances, if I just have the job, the education, the money, the house, whatever it is, that's what's going to fix me. See, I didn't know. I didn't know anything about what it meant when we talked about being an alcoholic. I didn't know I had an allergy of the body. I didn't know I had an obsession of the mind, and I didn't know I suffered from a spiritual malady. I didn't know any of that. So I make these plans to go into detox. I get into detox. Well, as the stuff was wearing off, I thought I've taken a wrong turn in Albuquerque, and clearly I don't belong here. But see, I was willing. I was desperate again, but there was that moment where I was willing to listen, because there was a nurse that pulled me aside and she took me in a room and she said, Cindy, just stay for tonight. That's all I'm asking you. I don't know how long we were in that little broom closet, but I ended up staying, and thank God I did, because I was willing to do that. I started to hear the language that you talk. I started to hear my stories. I started to see people who were just like me. And so I ended up staying in that detox. I did end up going to that 28-day program where I got sober. And then I moved into a recovery home for women. I lived there for about 2 years. And in that time, I was very active in AA. So you told me to get a sponsor and a home group. And if I put myself in the middle of AA, it's really hard to fall out. And so I was doing H&I commitments. I was a GSR for a group. I had a sponsor. I had 2 home groups. One was in each fellowship. And I was trying to work the steps and all of that kind of stuff. Well, of course, boy meets girl in AA campus, and mine greeted me at the door of my home group. And I ended up marrying him. And so we've been together for almost 27 years and married for 23. And it has been a journey, let me tell you, living with another alcoholic. But in that time, I was doing everything that you told me to do. Right. And life was getting really, really good. I was going to university. I was working a full-time job. And at about 18 months sober, I got a new sponsor, and we started going through the steps in the AA book. And she took me through the book. And I had been studying the book for a long time up to this point, but I started working the steps in AA. And then I started to get this really great big life. And slowly but surely, that great big life started to pull me out of Alcoholics Anonymous. Right? I was working a full-time job, so I would come into meetings late. I would leave early. I wouldn't attend my home group. I wasn't sponsoring anybody. I don't remember the last time I had written a piece of inventory. I hadn't finished any of my amends. And slowly I was kind of working the steps backwards. And, it was like this perfect storm that was happening. And as it was happening, I was close to 3 years sober. And at the same time, my mom got sick again. My mom had cancer. And I got real mad because, I wasn't doing the things that were necessary to stay sober or to have that conscious contact with the God of my understanding. And so, you started talking to me about God, and it was like, don't talk to me about God. I don't want to hear anything about him, because in my mind, I still had this old idea around this relationship with God. And if I did good, I was going to get good. And if I did bad, I was going to get bad. And that was not going to be sufficient. Now, I stayed in that untreated alcoholism for almost 2 years. And then I had a moment where I had a second surrender. And it's like it was my wedding day. I was in the bathroom. I couldn't seem to put my wedding dress on. And I got on my knees and I said, you know what, God, I'll make you a deal. You show me, because I'm a show me kind of girl. You show me you exist, and I will do whatever it is you want me to do. Now, be careful if you pray those prayers, right? Because he's going to show you in a way that only you can see. And so sure enough, he did. And I thought, Well played, sir. Well played. And so he held up his end of the deal and I held up mine. And I started working in AA and doing the thing. And life got good. I had some children, did all kinds of great stuff, and I wish I could tell you that sobriety has been amazing the whole time, but it comes with ups and downs. Life comes with ups and downs. But thank God that I have this program and I have a sponsor to help me to go through these things, right? Because on my own, it's not good. It's not good. So, that's kind of like in a general way, kind of what it was like. But I want to talk to you a lot more about what the steps have meant to me throughout my sobriety, right? When I first came into AA, like I said, I was working in another fellowship. My sponsor was in another fellowship. And when they talked about step one, they talked a lot about, being powerless over people, places, and things. Now, my big book does not say that. Alcoholics Anonymous does not say that, right? It says that I am powerless over alcohol. And what that means to me is I'm powerless over what happens when I put it in my body. And I am powerless over my ability to manage the decision whether I drink or not. And, the longer I stay sober, I have to be really diligent in that, because I don't ever want to get to a place where I'm arrogant enough to say, well, it's not like I'm going to drink or anything, because how do you know? How do you know? And I'll tell you a little story. So we get into this pandemic, good times. I meet, I get to go to lots of meetings. I get to meet a lot of people. I get to speak in places. I get a daily meeting with my sponsor and my sober family, because my sponsor lives in Texas. And, I was doing the deal, and, life was happening. So we get the restrictions let up in September of 2021, and I get on a plane. And I'm on my way to Texas to go to a retreat to see my sponsor and spend some time. And so, I get on the plane and I'm traveling. Now I'm 25 years sober at this time. And I end up missing my flight in Houston, and I was running through the airport. So you can tell that I was a little restless, irritable, and discontent. I was not a happy camper that I missed the flight. And I was getting really irritable, standing in line, waiting to get a new flight. So everything falls into place. I pause when agitated or doubtful. And I asked God to help me, right? Help me not yell at this poor lady that's standing behind the counter. So I get up to the counter, we get a new flight. I call my sponsor. I said, got my flight. Here's when I'm going to arrive. She says, perfect. Lots of great food to eat in Houston airport. Go grab a bite to eat and then get to the gate. Okay. So I'm sitting in this little Chinese restaurant. I'm sitting at the bar of this Chinese restaurant. And I thought, you know what? I hadn't checked my email. And so I decided to open up my email and check my email. And at that time, I had been doing some tests. And so I had been waiting for results. And, I had been doing a lot of prayer and meditation and really asking God to help me to realize that everything is okay, no matter what, right? Health or no health, I'm good. And I ended up opening, we have a thing called here, My Chart. So whenever you do any tests, it gets put into this chart and you can get into it. You can see the test results. So I decide to open it up and I see invasive ductal carcinoma. Now, I don't know what that means. So I Googled. I know what carcinoma means. So I Googled. Don't Google, right? My sponsor says, don't Google. Too late. I Googled. And what I realized sitting in that little restaurant in that Houston airport was that I had cancer. And it was my biggest fear that was coming true. And I called my husband and I called my sponsor. My sponsor said, you can't do anything about it right now. Get on the plane and get here. And we're going to do this thing one day at a time. And I have been doing a lot of stuff one day at a time. I had been doing a lot of inventory because I was struggling in a relationship with my daughter, all kinds of stuff, right? And so I'm like, okay, now my God is pretty funny and he does some pretty interesting things to get my attention. And while I was sitting there kind of in self-pity and self-centeredness, the guy about 2 arm lengths down is literally choking on like a chicken ball or something. You know what I mean? Like buddy behind him is giving him the high lick. And I'm just like, I'm like oblivious to what's going on, right? But it's like, get your attention away from you. So I end up getting up out of that chair and I walked out and I had this moment. And it was like, what Bill talks about in this story. Remember, he's standing in the lobby of the Mayflower Hotel, right? He's 6 months sober. Things aren't going well. And he's thinking, and he said, and he can hear the clinging and the clanging of the glasses, right? He's got to make this decision. Do I go and sit down in that bar and have a ginger ale? Right. Like that's what he's going to do. Or does he go and make a phone call? right? And thank God, these seconds and inches that we talk about, had he not gone and made those, not one, not two, but 10 phone calls, I'd have given up after two personally, because that's the kind of alcoholic that I am. But he made those phone calls, and thank God, because would we be here today? I don't know. That stuff isn't lost on me. And so I had that moment. I stepped out, and as soon as I stepped out of that restaurant, there was a bar sitting right there in the middle of the airport. And I had a moment in my mind where at 25 years sober, I said, I could sit down here, right now, and have a drink, and nobody would know. Like, that was the alcoholic mind that I had. And then it's like, we talk about the promises. Everybody reads the step 9 promises. They're beautiful promises. Don't get me wrong. But I think the step 10 promises are the most powerful promises. And it talks about, we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. For by this time we have been restored to sanity. We will recoil as if from a hot flame. We are safe and protected. And I got to experience that very promise, because I was working 10, 11, and 12 on a day-to-day basis, being in meetings on Zoom, being active. I got to recoil, and I got to the gate. Now that's 25 years sober. See, I'm as powerless over the drink, if not more today, than I ever was when I got here. And so, for me, I work this program like my life depends upon it, because it does. It really, really does. So step 1, I began to learn the true hopelessness of my alcoholism, right? I began to understand all of that insanity that revolves around it. And thank God I get to work with newcomers, because I don't ever want to forget. I don't ever want to forget what it was like. I've been doing some prayer and meditation and really being mindful in my meditation around the steps. And I had to, one of the readings that I was doing was really focusing on step 1. And I had a moment this week where I was looking at the past, and it was asking me questions about, what was your drinking like? What you did, could you control it? And I started to remember what it was like. And I broke into tears, and every inch of my body wanted to run. I wanted to recoil. I didn't want to look at this, but the truth is I need to look at that. I need to be fully aware of my alcoholism on a day-to-day basis. Because if I get complacent or arrogant, then I will convince myself, I got a tricky mind. And I will convince myself that, I'm making too big a deal of this thing. I've been sober long enough. I don't need this AA stuff. What am I doing? And see, my alcoholism needs to get me alone to convince me so that I will take that drink, right? That's the insanity that we talk about around step 2, right? The insanity that precedes the first drink. And so if I'm not treating my spiritual malady, the insanity slowly returns. And a good friend of mine, he describes it like, it's like smoke under the door, right? Slowly, the room fills up with smoke. And before I know it, I'm in trouble. And what my sponsor has said to me is, if you think you're in trouble, you're in so much more trouble than you think you're in, right? Because I can't see the big picture. So if I think I'm in trouble, I'm way past it, Now, the beauty of step 2, see, when I first came into AA, what step 2 looked like for me was a checkbox, right? I had a higher power, check. I had been a religious kid. I was praying when I was drinking. Yes, a lot of those prayers were, please God, get me out of this one. I swear to God, I'll never do it again. That was, I called on him like that often, but I did pray all the time. And so when I came in AA and you gave me this proposition of, you need to have a higher power, it's like, okay. And I moved on. And at 3 years sober, I didn't have that relationship anymore, right? I had to have a totally new conception of it. And I've been, I've had a lot of opportunity over the years. And right now, I have a sponsee who's actually an atheist. And it's been interesting. And the beautiful thing about step 2 is it doesn't say I have to believe in anything. It says we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. See, I just have to believe that it's possible. And the only way I know it's possible is by watching you. See, I watched what you did and I followed you. You said, come with me, and I went, and I did what you told me to do. And because of that, I got to experience this entire psychic change, but I had to do the steps in order to get there, right? And so step 2 for me today is very important, right? I need to have a power greater than me. Now, step 3, when I first looked at it, it says we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood it. And I thought I was making the decision to go on just with the rest of the steps. And I made that decision. I had no qualms about that, right? I understood my alcoholism. I understood the powerlessness, the hopelessness, that I wasn't going to be the solution. You weren't going to be the solution, that I needed something bigger. But see, I blew past a whole piece of literature that is, I think, is some of the most beautiful pieces in Alcoholics Anonymous. And those are pages 60 to 63, where it talks about I am the actor forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, and the scenery. So when people talk about being powerless over people, places, and things, that's a step 3 issue. See, I'm trying to get you to do what I want all the time, and I'll be nice. You bet I'll be kind to you. I'll try and manipulate you, but then you still won't do it. Well, I'm going to threaten you. I'm going to take things from you. Like, I mean, I find myself in those pages all the time. And what I love about it, it says forever. So I'm forever going to do these things. Now, I don't have to stay there as long anymore. I don't have to get in as much trouble anymore. I can actually laugh about how insane I can be when I think I'm running the show, right? And one of the things that it really talks about is in there, it says that the play never suits me. Now, I'll give you a good example of that. So I have 2 children, and one of them is 22 and she lives in Toronto, and the other one is 19 and he lives here. And during that pandemic, like I said, we had to bring my daughter back from university, and she was here for a little while. This is her room. And she was here for a while. She was not happy to be here. And she made it abundantly clear to me she was not happy to be here. And then she moved back to Toronto, and she was going back to school. They were doing it remotely, but they lived in the vicinity of the university. And I had made a financial decision that she didn't agree with. And she got mad, and she got real mad. And she wouldn't return my text. She wouldn't talk to me. She really cut me out of her life. And so when I got diagnosed with cancer, I had been doing a lot of inventory. I've been doing a lot of my sponsor telling me to sit still, right? To give that space. Now, when I got diagnosed with cancer, I honestly believed that, my husband was going to tell her, and she was going to send me a message and say, Mom, I'm so sorry for being so terrible to you. And I love you. And that's not what happened. It's not what happened at all. She sent me a message and she said, Mom, I'm really sorry to hear all that. And I'm going to pray for you, but I'm not ready to have a relationship with you. And I thought, you know what? Okay. And so what I did is I focused on all the people that were around me that wanted to be in a relationship with me, that wanted to spend time with me. And I walked through the process of surgery and radiation and all of that stuff. And I did it with all of you, right? You gave me the courage and the strength to do those things. So, a lot of time went by, and she was very, very upset with me. And so last summer I flew to Toronto with a sponsee. We were going to see a concert. And I wanted to see my daughter. And so I sent her a message, and it would be really hit and miss whether she would respond to me. And so I sent her a message. I said, hey, I'm coming to Toronto. We're going to the same concert as you. Do you guys want to have some dinner before? And it took her 2 days to respond to me. 2 days. Play was not suiting this girl here. So she finally responds to me. She says, no, we're going to go to the concert early. And I sent my sponsor a message. My sponsor called me, and I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I can't keep putting my heart out there and my heart getting broken. My sponsor said, I want you to get on the plane, and I want you to have a great time with your sponsee. And I want you to focus on being present there, right? That's what I want you to do. So I did that. Now, one of the promises says self-seeking will slip away. That has not left this girl, because what I did when I landed is I was posting on Instagram so that my daughter knew exactly where I was in Toronto. And so as the day went on, I actually got a couple messages from her. And the last message that I got from her, she was telling me where she was in the venue. And I thought, well, this is weird. She doesn't want to see me. I don't know why she's bothered telling me. And it turns out that she was in the front row, right in front of the stage, and we were in the seating area behind her. And I saw the boyfriend because he's like 6 feet tall. And I sent a message. I said, that's funny because we're right behind you. And she turned around and she came up the stairs, and she walked over and she hugged my sponsee and she hugged me. She chatted with us for a few minutes. She went back. She came back after the concert. We started walking, and she started talking. And she talked about her mental health. She suffers from borderline personality disorder. She talked about her therapy. She talked about her school. She talked about her jobs that she was doing. She talked about her trip. And then she hugged me, and I left. And the next day when I went back home, I called up my sponsor and I said, here, this is what happened. And I said, I can't play this yo-yo. And my sponsor said, hold up, let me get this straight. You got on a plane, you went to Toronto, and you saw the kid you weren't supposed to see. Not only did she hug you once, she hugged you twice. She told you everything about her life. She gave you everything you wanted for the past 2 years, and still the play does not suit. And I went, oh my God. Right? That's what we're talking about when we're trying to run the show all the time, right? Now, I just had another beautiful opportunity with her. I traveled again this summer, and I got to actually go to a concert with her. And we spent a lot of time. We got to have dinner together, and we talked about her therapy. We talked about all kinds of things. And today I have a relationship with her. And, before I left, I wanted to say to my sponsor, well, you know what? It's not perfect. And my sponsor reminded me one more time, what would be perfect? What would be enough? See, the play never suits me. You don't do it fast enough. You don't do it in the order I want it done. The play never suits me. And so I begin to see that in my life. Now, had it not been for the process of the inventory 4 through 9, would I have seen it? I don't know. See, the beauty of inventory, and I have such a hard time when people go, ooh, that scary 4 step. Stop it. It is the most powerful tool I have ever had in Alcoholics Anonymous. See, I don't get to see all the things that I am. I get to see what I'm not. I'm not this loving, tolerant, patient person that I want to think I am all the time. I have these great values of, I want to have relationships based on communication and respect and love. But the moment you piss me off, I cut you out of my life. You're dead to me. I got to go. I'm not talking to you for days. Right? So I can't fool myself about values, but that's the beauty of inventory, is I get to put that in paper in front of me, and I get to see how I'm walking in the world. I get to see how I'm constantly in collision with the world around me when I'm constantly demanding that you give me emotional security and self-esteem. See, for the longest time, I thought, if my kids love me, then I'm a good mom, right? If I come into a meeting like this in AA and you like me, then I must be a good AA member. See, it can't come from you. It can never come from you, because it won't be enough. You just won't give me enough, right? And so I have to be getting these things from God. And so what I get to see is I get to see what separates me from my higher power, right? I get to go from this self-centered objective to this God-centered objective, right? And so I got to do a little work to get there. And the beautiful thing is I get to share that with my sponsor. She gives me large chunks of truth to digest, and I get to move on and then get to 6 and 7, where I have to make a decision to cooperate or not, right? Now, there are a lot of things that I see objectionable in my life. Does it mean I'm going to change them? Not always. Do they make me look bad? Yes, they do. But it doesn't mean that I'm always going to cooperate. See, it has to come from within for me to go, yeah, that's not who I want to be today. And sometimes I'll say that to my sponsor. She's like, is that true? Is that really true? And I have to, I have to get honest with myself and go, you know what? You're right. I don't. See, I have some interesting character defects. And one of them I love is sarcasm. I'm sure you didn't notice that, but I do love me a little sarcasm. So I am a very sarcastic lady. Now, I told you I have another kid, and that boy is the most sarcastic little bugger that I have ever met in my entire life. And that kid, talks to me with sarcasm from the moment he wakes up until the time he goes to bed. I love him. I do. I pray for this boy. And what I started to notice was he was just, it was bugging me. It was bugging me. Now, the beautiful thing is the spiritual axiom is mine, right? Yes, you may step on my toes. Yes, you may do things. But if I'm disturbed, that disturbance is mine. And if I'm trying to write inventory to get you to change, I'm screwed, because that's not going to happen. So he was being really sarcastic to me. And, I said to him one time, I said, when you do that, it makes it sound like you think I'm stupid, right? You talk to me like I'm dumb. You talk to me with disrespect. And then a light bulb went on, went, is it possible, Cindy, that when you do that, that perhaps the people on the other side might think that too? And I went, oh. And so something that I hadn't found objectionable only in you now began to become objectionable in me. And slowly but surely, I still do it. I do love it, but I don't do it at the expense of others, right? I am very mindful of, where I use it and where it's well placed. But usually those character defects become objectionable because I see it in you first. And then I go, well, why is that bugging me? And well, because I have it too, right? You spot it, you got it. That's what they used to say to me all the time, right? Now, 8 and 9 has been a very up and down journey. I have struggled with 8 and 9 because my pride will keep me from it. Right. And so, when we talk about alcohol, I have no doubt in my mind that I have another drunk in me. Right. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Right. And that depends on what I do on a day-to-day basis. Now, I know if I was ever to drink again, I probably wouldn't come back. My pride would keep me from you. And so people who relapse and come back, I have a profound respect for your humility and your courage and your grace to come back in these rooms. And I thank you for that. Right. So, 8 and 9 has been a struggle for me. So I've had interesting amends around that. Now, one of the amends that I think about, and now it has not been a direct amends. Now, we don't believe in living amends. That's practicing these spiritual principles in all my affairs. But this amends is, when I was out there drinking, and one of the reasons that I got emotional while looking at step 1 is because when I was out there drinking and doing my stuff, my sister had a little girl, and that little girl lived with us at one time, and she ended up getting into some of my stuff. And she was really young at the time. And I have a lot of guilt and shame over that she could have been hurt really badly. And I broke a lot of promises to that little girl. And when I first got sober and I would make plans with her, I remember one time she was sitting in the car with me. She might have been almost 5 years old at the time. And she said, Aunt Cece, I like it when you show up. And I cried because I hadn't realized that I would make these sweet promises to this little kid and I would break her heart all the time. So, a couple of years ago in 2019, that little girl was getting married. And I got to help plan her wedding, and I got to help be around that whole process. Now, I have not made direct amends to her because there's a lot of people involved around that, because a lot of my drinking and using was with her father. And I caused a lot of damage around there. And so I don't get to make amends at the expense of other people. I don't get to throw other people under the bus so that I feel okay. So, I was helping her with this wedding. Everybody was sitting in their seats. We were getting ready. I had them all lined up because I got to arrange the lights, the ballet, and the scenery, just like I like it. And people were calling my name, and they're like, Cece, Courtney's calling you. And I was like, okay. And so I went upstairs, and she said, Cece, will you help me get dressed? See, Alcoholics Anonymous, because I did what you told me to do, I got to be the aunt that I had always wanted to be. See, I never thought I was going to be able to zip up her dress on her wedding day and walk shoulder to shoulder with her through all these things. I didn't know that months later, when she was about to have these twins and was absolutely terrified, that I was going to be the one that was going to comfort her and saying, you know what? I know what that's like. I've been there. It's scary. I got you. Right? I got to be there when my sister said, she's struggling with these babies. She's not physically well. Will you help her? See, that's the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. I almost hurt her child. And here she was giving me permission and asking me to help her grandchildren. And I was like, absolutely. See, that's the gift of AA. That's what I get to do when I clean up my side of the street. When I start showing up, I get to be the person that people rely on a day-to-day basis. Now, 10, 11, and 12, these are the foundation of my
Go ahead. You there? Or did this happen again?
Yeah. Sorry about that. Excitement in Canada. We lost power there for a second. It was a whole chaos. Maybe it was God raining down there. I don't know. So 10, 11, and 12. 10, 11, and 12 is like the foundation of my recovery. Step 10 is as I walk through my day, right? I get to pause when agitated or doubtful, and I get to look at how I'm walking through the world, right? And I get the beautiful opportunity to pause and do what is necessary. Now, step 11 has been a huge, huge part of my recovery. Especially in this time. Like I said, I got sick for a while, and I had to do a lot of things. And never once in that time, although it was my biggest fear that had come true, never once did I ever think that my higher power ever abandoned me. See, a lot of times in the room, I hear people will say, you can't have fear and faith at the same time. That has not been my experience. There were times when I had to do surgery or I had to do radiation, and I was absolutely terrified. But see, I knew that God was right up there beside me on the bed going, I got you, boo. I got you. And that has been my experience, getting to do prayer and meditation on a day-to-day basis. I write my evening review every day. I pause when I walk through the world. Now, sometimes I still reload and go. And other times, if I do this thing right, I can let God come in. Now, step 12 is not just about me carrying the message, right? We get to do that. I get to be of service. I get to do all those kinds of things. It's not just about that. But, one of the reasons, the selfish reasons that I do carry the message in AA is because I don't know if my children are ever going to need this program. And if they do, it's not going to be me. It's going to be you that carries it to them. And I want to make sure that you have everything that you need to give that to them. I want what I got when I came into these rooms. Now, when my daughter was younger, we were at a competition and we were coming back from the competition. My daughter was a dancer and we were heading back to the hotel and I was a passenger in the backseat of the car. And these two parents were sitting in the front and I had these two little girls beside me, my daughter and her friend. And we were driving along and the woman said, we're going back to the hotel. We're going to have some drinks. And she said, but Cindy, you don't drink. And I thought, here's my moment. Here's my moment. I'm going to use a line that I had heard. And I looked up she looked at me in the rear view mirror and I said, no, I don't drink. Because when I drink, I break out into handcuffs. Well, the car went silent. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know what to do. She just kind of looked at me and she was like, oh, okay. So we moved on. Now, about a couple months ago, I was sitting in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and a guy came up to me and he said, hey, Cindy, there's a newcomer at the back of the room. And she's here with her stepdad and would you talk to her? And I turned around and it was that little girl that was sitting beside me in the back of that car that day. And I got to walk over to her and I got to give her a hug and give her my number and threaten her that she better use it, that I don't want to be coming looking for her. That's the beauty. See, you might help my kids, but I get to help yours. And that's why, I get the privilege of doing this thing. I have to practice these spiritual principles in all my affairs. I don't get to say that I'm walking this spiritual path, but not with that guy over there. I'm not going to be nice to that guy. See, it doesn't work like that. I'm either working this deal or I'm not. I'm either walking a spiritual path or I'm not. There is no in between. And so on a day-to-day basis, I try and practice these spiritual principles everywhere that I go, whether it's in the rooms of AA or on the outside. I've been given a gift in Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's my responsibility to give it away. And so if you are new in Alcoholics Anonymous, like someone who has 5 weeks just coming out of rehab, I heard at the beginning of the meeting, I want to say welcome. I hope you come all the way in and you sit all the way down and you let us surround you and you do everything that is necessary to stay sober. Because I'm telling you, when I came in, I thought really small and God has given me a really big life. And we want that for you. And if you've been someone that has been sober for a really long time, I want to thank you for my sobriety. Thank you for having those doors open for me, for showing me how to do this thing one day at a time. I am truly grateful for the gift that you have given me and countless others that came behind you. And if you've been someone who's left us for a little while, for whatever reason, and you're just coming back, I want to say welcome home. We've been waiting for you. We got a seat right here for you, and we hope that you stay, right? And as a good friend of mine says all the time in my Monday night meeting, he says, if nobody has told you that they love you today, I love you. And so I want to thank you for my sobriety and thank you for letting me come and be here with you. And sorry about the hiccups. This is what happens in Canada. You know what I mean? I don't know. So thank you and God bless.